employment lawyer. I represent employers only in employment matters, anything from union negotiations to arbitrations, matters before the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, Department of Labor, all these initials that we have to, EEOC, ICRC, DOL, all these. But anyway, that's a little bit about what I do. Okay. One of the things I want to start with is how the term sexual harassment, how that even became law. When Congress in the early 70s was considering the Civil Rights Act to add things such as race discrimination, and that was the real topic of that at the time. Some Republicans decided it would be a good idea to try to sabotage the entire law by adding something that they didn't think anybody would ever agree to. So they added the word sex to the Civil Rights Act. So the Congress is reviewing this, and they're looking at race, and people agreed that race should be something that you should not be able to discriminate against. And then they added other things later on, but they added this sex component. So immediately when the law was passed, sex discrimination became unlawful. So in other words, you cannot discriminate against someone because of their sex. Well, that's what so those three little letters then became an entire part of our law that probably was maybe not even intended by Congress, because the way our laws are written, they say that there are two things people should not see. One is how sausage is made, and the other is how laws are made. But this is an example of how something was kind of added that maybe really wasn't intended to go along with this. So then the courts get faced with interpreting what is sex discrimination. And it was easy to distinguish between, okay, a case where someone is fired because they're female. Well, that's probably sex discrimination. If a man in the same circumstances is treated differently, that's sex discrimination. Well, then what about if someone, it can be male or female, but most often we're talking about females being the ones who are the victims of this. What about if someone is hitting on her during work? Is that really sex discrimination? Well, the courts finally, through years, have said, well, yeah, that's discrimination too. So even though the law didn't say sexual harassment, and you won't find that in the Civil Rights Act, you'll find the word sex, and the courts then interpret, well, part of sex discrimination is harassing someone because of their sex. Now, we're not going to limit this to sex discrimination here, but most of what we're going to talk about is that, because that's where the law really began with the harassment terms. So what is this? What is sexual harassment? Well, first and foremost, it's unwelcome sexual advances. And I say the key to this is the first word, unwelcome. We get into this all the time in criminal law. I don't personally, but lawyers do. When someone is charged with rape, for example, and you'll see this in social media, you'll see this in the news, where someone is claiming they were raped. Well, the first defense that, usually it's the female victim, the first defense that the male uses is, well, it was consensual. She was going along with it. Well, that same terminology then came out in civil law, which is all this civil law, not criminal. The term unwelcome then is, was it consensual? If a jury says it's consensual, it was consensual. The problem is, how do you prove that? Well, we can talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, that's part of sexual harassment. It has to be an unwelcome sexual advance. Again, those three little words, it has to be sexual. Another type of sexual harassment is requests for sexual favors. Hey, how about if you and I go out, you'll get a promotion, or you'll get a raise, or whatever. that would be a request for sexual favor. So far, fairly obvious. Now we get into the next part of it. Other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Now, one of the things I really want to get across to you is that we're going to talk about hostile environment and as a subset of harassment. But you will hear people all the time claiming that their supervisor is harassing them. Or you will hear people claim they've created a hostile environment. Well, for me as an attorney, it really doesn't matter so much if someone's claiming harassment or hostile environment. What I'm going to look at is, on what grounds are they claiming that? If they're claiming that my supervisor is harassing me because I'm not working fast enough, well, that's not sexual, so there's no cause of action there. Or if my supervisor is always on my case because I'm talking to my coworkers instead of working, well, that's not sexual harassment. That's not a hostile environment that is actionable. So we always wanted to keep those things in mind. For these types of cases, it has to be something sexual. Now, when we get into other types of discrimination or harassment, such as racial or whatever, again, it has to be because of a protected class. And right now, sex is a protected class. Okay, so then the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency that is charged with trying to figure out, what does this sex discrimination mean? Okay, they say when submission is a term or condition of an individual's employment, or is used for the basis of employment decisions, or interferes with a person's work performance, or creates a hostile work environment. So if you have two coworkers and they meet in a bar someplace after work, and they're coworkers, not supervisor and subordinate, just two coworkers, and they have a consensual relationship, is that sexual harassment? I would say no, it's not, because when you look at these various definitions, it has to be unwelcome. I mean, it all starts, in my opinion, it all starts with that. It also has to be related to the employment. So if two people, there's a chair here, go on. If two people are in a consensual relationship and there's not, one's not a supervisor over the other, that's probably not really work related. Now, we'll talk scenarios later that will convince you that it's probably not a great idea to do that, but anyway. Or it creates that hostile work environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, a hostile work environment. So I think that the best way to describe these and to help you understand them is to go through some various scenarios that we've created. So the first one here, we have a male non-supervisory employee, and that's going to be an important part of this, often touches a female coworker in a sexual manner, but the female does not report the conduct to management. Okay? So he's always hitting on her, she's uncomfortable with it, but she doesn't report it to management. So the question is that actionable sexual harassment? Well, I would say just based on what I've told you here, it's not actionable because management was not told about it. So one of the things I really want to impress upon you is how important it is that if you as a supervisor are told about some harassment, document it, get it to Robbie, and we'll figure out what to do about it. You can't just hide your head in the sand and hope that it goes away. So in this scenario, I would say no, it's not actionable, and that would be the key here. It's not actionable because she hasn't told anybody about it.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make sense if the supervisor sees it,
Very good point.
even though she's not complaining
You're a
about
slide ahead of me. What if she has told management? Is that actionable sexual harassment? And I would say yes, it is, unless the company does something about it. So just because something occurs at work, and let's say it was, he he's hitting on her all the time at work. She complains to management. If management does something, we'll talk about what they should do, then it may no longer be actionable sexual harassment. If management learns of it, is told about it, and does nothing, then it is actionable. So it's important, again, number one, to document it, number two, to get it to the right people and address it. Well, what if she didn't say anything? And this is where you're getting to, Sam. So what if management should have known about it? We'll change the scenario a little bit. We'll say that the receptionist desk is right outside your office, and you are president of the company. And you see this going on all the time, but she never comes to you and complains about it. But you are aware of it. A court's going to say, and when she, leaves and sues you, or she doesn't leave, she sues you anyway, she's going to claim, well, they should have known. It was right outside his office all the time. And so that still would be actionable sexual harassment if management should have known about it. Wake up. Just slid off the air. There. So what do you do about it? Either you're aware of it directly from the employee, or you are aware of it because you witnessed it, or you're aware of it because someone else reported. Let's say another coworker said, and this happens all the time, where the receptionist is concerned about it, so she talks to her people that she talks to at lunchtime, none of whom are supervisors, and then when those people come and tell you about it, well, now you're on notice. So you need to do something. So what do? The first thing you do in any of these scenarios is you investigate. And it's very important during these investigations that you not just call him in and start reading the riot act to him. What you do is you start with the alleged victim. That's good timing. So you start with the victim, find out from the victim what is she, and it's usually she, what is she alleging? Is she alleging that he just kind of makes her uncomfortable? Is she alleging that he's touching her inappropriately? All kinds of things. So you want to find out from her what her story is. Now you may want to then talk to him about it, but that'll all depend on what she says. You want to tell her, and you want to do this, you want to keep this as confidential as you can. So you don't want everybody in the company knowing about what's been alleged. You want to keep this confidential because there's a separate cause of action. Let's say you tell everybody in the company, and this receptionist, we're still going to pick on the receptionist today. The receptionist, comes to management and tells you that this guy's hitting on me all the time. I'm really tired of it. I've told him no, but he persists. If you would then tell his best buddy, and at that point he starts harassing her, maybe not sexual harassment, but he talks negatively to her, does a lot of times people personal jokes or whatever, and makes her more and more uncomfortable, and that's creating a hostile environment, then you've made this a bigger problem than it was initially. So you want to keep that confidential to the extent possible. And then you want to take immediate and appropriate action. That's going to be your defense as an employer. What did we do about it? Well, number one, when it came to our attention, we documented it. Number two, we talked to her and got her side of the story. Number three, maybe we talked to him. Maybe we talked to others. For example, it may be appropriate to talk about others in the management suite in the scenario that we brought up with the receptionist. Are there others in the management suite who have witnessed this or who have seen this? And maybe we don't need to go to him and ask, did you do this, if there's enough other corroborating evidence. And so then we're going to take prompt, appropriate remedial action. It doesn't mean the guy has to get fired. It all depends on how long the person's been here, what sort of work history he's had. Is he a repeat offender? Has he been making other people uncomfortable, et cetera? So it may be just bringing him in and advising him that this is not permitted. And then if he does it again, then you kind of take him through the steps of discipline if that's appropriate. I told Sam a story about this one where I had a client, construction company, who had a supervisor who was a repeat offender. And what they made him do is he had to come to my office and sit one-on-one for me to give him this demonstration and this presentation and talking about it. So that was not probably the most pleasant hour in his life, but the next time I was there doing this presentation, I saw he was there, and so it meant they kept him, and he must have improved his conduct. So you want to take an immediate and appropriate disciplinary action. Okay, let's change scenarios here. Okay, so we have a male supervisor, and he asks a female subordinate. Again, this is going to be important. We have a supervisor and a female subordinate. Come to his apartment, have a drink, and we'll see what happens after that. It doesn't have to be real direct. People are not usually as direct as the lawyers would like to, the plaintiff's lawyers would like them to be, maybe. So they have to say, okay, well, what was the context of this conversation? What was said? What did, kind of how was he acting? How was she acting, et cetera. So she says, no, I'm not interested. At that point, he evaluates, does her review, does an evaluation of her, and she is given a poor review. She's been just a stellar employee until she said no. Gives a poor evaluation. She's up for a promotion, she doesn't get it, and eventually she's terminated. So